Hi, friends. I am Marie Woods, founder of Life Above Foundation, your host, a professional counselor, family and marriage therapist, and a wholeness life coach. Welcome to Relationship Real Talk, the podcast where we dive deep and tackle the toughest relationship challenges Christians face today. Are you tired of struggling with unforgiveness, past wounds, and conflicts? Feeling lonely or having trouble communicating? Wrestling with trust issues or trying to balance your faith with your relationship goals? Feeling stuck and stagnant in your relationship? You are in the right place. Here at the Relationship Real Talk, we get real and cover a wide range of topics, including relationship anxiety, trauma bonds, infidelity, estrangement, toxic dynamics, dating after divorce, and how to heal from relationship trauma and grow and build healthy and lasting relationships. We're not just about identifying the problems. We're all about finding real, integrated solutions from multiple disciplines and offering professional help from different fields to mend and strengthen your relationships. So, let's get started on this journey together, one honest, heartfelt conversation at a time. So today I have a really special guest speaker. Her name is Joanna Wu Xingchun, her Chinese name, but I call her Joanna. So before we start our today's episode, let me give you her intro. Joanna, she is a licensed professional counselor, registered play therapist, EMDR therapist, level 2 certified clinical trauma professional. And she's a teaching fellow at Harvard University Graduate School of Education. She serves Texas residents with life transition issues, clinical mental struggles, and developmental attachment traumas via telehealth. Welcome, Joanna.
Hi, Marie.
We have been longtime friends, right? So I know I'm looking forward to our dialogue conversation today. And so today's topic is going to be disconnection in relationship. So talk about the relationship. There are lots of relationships that sometimes fall into the category of disconnection in
Mm.
one way or another. So let's start with this, Joanna. What bring you to this topic? Why you focus on disconnection from your clinical practice and maybe from a Christian's background, from the Bible's perspective? Can you give us an intro about this topic?
Yeah. Thank you, Marie. It's a really wonderful question. So, as like, it's actually my own personal journey, my personal healing journey, and then it's also my faith, my belief journey. And as you just said, I'm a clinical trauma professional. Lots of the time, many of the time in my clinical work, yeah, we're talking about clinical symptoms. We're talking about depression, anxiety, eating disorders, OCDs, addictions. But if we delve down into the personal history, the family history, a lot of time it's all about trauma. And definitely, we're not going to go into the definition of trauma. We could later on if we have enough time. But then, yet, it's almost like everyone has a hole in our life, like in our heart. Um, and that is the deep drive inside of our heart. Sometimes it could be fear driven, like I'm longing for the connection, I'm longing for the love. Because if I don't do that, I will be all alone. Or otherwise, it could be I'm longing for love, I'm longing for a place where I can belong to. And that hole in our heart, sometimes as either Christians or Catholic or people with religious beliefs, we heard that parable, like we all having a hole in our heart. But what does that really mean? Um, Interestingly, like when I started my journey becoming a licensed professional counselor, I didn't realize um, there's so many connections about that with the trauma work. So it's not just about the hole in our heart. truly it's a physiological thing. It's a mental thing. It's an emotional thing. And also it's through generation and generation. It's in the family system. And so we're talking about relationship and disconnection. I really wanted to just use this opportunity to come from like another perspective. Um, we long for the relationship, but there are so many reasons, multiple layers of factors that stop us to form the relationship. And then we all know that like relationship is, which means when it starts, actually never ends unless we stop trying. So if there's a disruption, there after that there's a repairment, then the relation will continue. But once we stop trying, the void, the disconnection, it doesn't mean that the relationship stops. It actually means that the relationship paused, but the relationship's still there. So we long and we miss and we grieve. And maybe there's anger, maybe there's sadness, maybe there's questions, maybe there's a lot of like, what's going on with that person? Or we turned inward. What's going on with me? Is there anything that we did wrong? Is there anything that I'm not doing good enough? Or we blame on that person. So the relationship never stopped. Let's put it this way.
Mm-hmm. Right. I agree with you. Really, relationships, there's different levels, and from one way to another, no matter it's a close relationship or distant relationship, not just distant, location distant. Sometimes we feel close to somebody, sometimes we feel far away from the person, even though the person we live with daily.
Mm,
So yeah, it's a big concept when talk about disconnections. So let's dive in. I know you have a lot to talk about on this topic. So talk to our audience, between like a disconnection and disattachment, especially our audience out there, if you're a therapist or you are a caregiver or you in a lay counselor position or you are leaders caring for people. So help us understand those concepts, how this play out in relationships.
mm, mm. There's so many layers. Um, so when we're talking about this connection, sometimes we go back to the early childhood experiences, right? Um, Either with the attachment trauma thing that we probably start to hear more and more than usual. In the past, maybe 20 years ago, we hear the terms childhood trauma, and then now it's transforming into attachment trauma and then developmental trauma. What that means is, so what we learn unconsciously and consciously, how we can trust people or trust ourselves, or knowing that I am an individual. I have my sense of autonomy, and if I need help, if I ask for help, people will come up to help me. Those basic things and the basic needs and expressions are actually formed and shaped in a very, very young age. Sometimes we call it in utero experiences, which means when we are in mother's womb, the connection between us and our mother through the chemical transmissions, through her respiratory system, through her blood system. Every time when our mom is feeling happy, we will feel that through her, maybe her vessel contractions, maybe from her body, from her muscle. We feel that. And when our mom is feeling distressed, we feel that in her body as well. Her cortisol level will goes higher, adrenaline might goes higher. And then when she crashed, when she's having a mental breakdown, when she's falling into a deep state of sorrow or loneliness or emptiness, we feel that in her womb as well. That's the first connection, physiologically, or say physically. We're not talking about spiritual connection, but just physically. That's how we learned and through those moments and moments and moments of contact through placenta, through her vessel, through her body. We build a connection. And then when we were born, the very first few months, sometimes we say attachment is the relationship between us and the main caregiver. most of the time we will refer that to mother. But then nowadays it might change because we might have other caregivers. But generally speaking, it will still be mother because we're coming out from our mother's womb most of the time, right? Um, and so those moments of when we're having a wet diaper or when we're hungry, when we are feeling cold, the baby really don't know how to say it. So they will cry, they will scream, they will kick their legs, probably until fourth month, they will utter some words and some sound to make people know that, hey, hey, I'm here, I have the needs. But if the expression of the needs is not being met, then what happened? When the baby, when the infant feel those physiological needs, or maybe the emotional needs, like nobody's here, I'm feeling alone, but the baby does not have the vocabulary to describe I'm lonely, but it's a feeling of disconnection, a feeling of weirdness, a feeling of emptiness. So baby cry, adrenaline kick in, sympathetic nervous system is on. A lot of chemical flood into the system. The breathing rate goes up, the heart rate goes up. And when someone comes over to comfort the baby, let's say the main caregiver, or maybe other person, family member come over to help, pat on the baby and telling the baby, shh, you're fine, you're safe. Oh, you got a wet diaper. Oh, you just pooped. Let's get you cleaned up. And the baby hear the sounds of the caregiver, feel being taken care of. And all those things are nonverbal. It happened nonverbally. The baby doesn't have the vocabulary, doesn't have the brain development capacity to understand. All the baby knows or feels was, oh, I'm safe now. I'm fine now. I'm no longer feeling cold. I'm no longer feeling hungry. I'm no longer feeling alone. And so when the needs being met, that connection happened. The relationship is ongoing, right? And inside of the baby, the physiological system, how it changes is parasympathetic nervous system start to get stronger. It doesn't mean our sympathetic nervous system is completely offline. No, it's like the brake and gas, but you don't let go of any one of it. They're like interchangeably, but they're on. So parasympathetic nervous system gets a little bit stronger, cortisol level goes down, our body, the chemical stress hormones go into a new homeostasis, and the baby start to feel much more calmer. And maybe the mom or maybe the caregiver kiss the baby, and the oxytocin start to flood into the blood system. The baby's feeling loved. And so the relationship connection shapes the baby's worldview and perception of, am I trustworthy? Can I trust someone? Am I enough? Do I need to give someone something so I can be loved? Those are the early attachment. But then later on, we grow older and older, first year, second year, third year, and life is not always good. Even the good enough parenting, it says we're just doing parenting good enough because we cannot do it good and perfect all the time. It's not realistic. So, which means within the relationship, there's always disruption, no matter how perfect the relationship is. So sometimes when I hear people saying, I will ask them, tell me a little bit about your childhood, tell me a little bit about you and your mom. And my client will tell me, oh, I have a happy childhood. I have a wonderful mom. Or say, I have a wonderful dad. We have a really good relationship. Then we'll start to dig in a little bit. Then tell me a moment that how do you feel when you, let's say, when you did something wrong? How did you feel? Somebody who was there to comfort you? Or when you're feeling sad, who was there for you? Or who came over to check in with you when you are having a fever? And a lot of time, shockingly, when the client realized, wow, I thought I have a happy childhood, but then those moments when I was being vulnerable, even until now, I couldn't remember who was there for me, but the feeling, or say the images, or even the smell was lingering there in our system. There was no one there for me, even though in my mind, cognitively, I thought I have a happy childhood. I have my parents, they're alive. I have my siblings, they are alive. But when I was having difficult moment, nobody was there. And that's attachment trauma. What happened? Sometimes abuse and neglect could be much more hurtful than abuse itself. Abuse is like what happened, inflicted on you, maybe physically, emotionally, verbally, um, spiritually. But then neglect sometimes is way more hurtful. Um, Definitely there's no comparison, but it's really powerful when the relationship's supposed to be there, but it was not there. It's supposed to happen, but it did not happen. So circle back to the disconnection. Earlier, we were talking about the nervous system and the chemistry in our body. Also, I wanted to point out one point is when the outcry of the baby, the moment when the sympathetic nervous system kick in, cortisol level gets higher. But then if that's not resolved, the baby will going to stay or say lock or get stuck in a moment of nervous system is on. The body, the heart rate is high, the breathing rate is high, but there's no external support. And so the stress hormone in the body will continue secrets to protect our body. And it will keep circulating. But then the baby quickly will learn that maybe crying after hours of crying, nobody came. And the baby will learn, I have to soothe myself. So I have to do self-regulation. I suck my thumbs or I crawl into a baby fetal pose, or I just learned how to be silenced. Those are self-regulation. But those self-regulation, it works. It worked back in the time, but it also lingered in our system until now. So sometimes when we say, "Oh, the child is so good," your child is so wonderful, they're so self-motivated. They don't need to, especially Asian parents, we do want our kids, well, maybe not all, but there's a tendency and stereotype that kids they have to be academically good, and probably all straight A students, and then taking APs in high school. Sometimes it's really unrealistic. But however, when we say, "Well, your child is so good," meaning that they're self-driven, they are self-motivated, they're doing things, they are quiet. They are quiet in not verbalizing their distress, not verbalizing their anger, not verbalizing their fear, not verbalizing their needs, because we learned not to speak up. We learned keep it to ourselves. And that's part of the disconnection between us and ourselves. Because when we feel it, we can express it. And many of times as an adult, especially in really good SES, population, highly intellectualized people, we are so wonderful in our world, at work, maybe in our family, maybe in our social status. We learn how to ace out and how to grow out of the fear.
Yeah.
But then it will still inside. If we don't have the awareness, if we don't build out awareness and continue working on that, it will still be inside of ourselves physically. And that's why we see a lot of chronic pain. Um, Sometimes we call it stress, but then a lot of times more than stress. And people after our mid 40s, 50s, we start to have a lot of health issues, especially with high achievers. But then circle back, there's also a lot of reason with why we're working so hard to make it there, to make it to be socially well, or even family-wise, being a good father, being a good mother.
Mhm.
Um, so the disconnection really wanted us to really just look into that little piece of it is what make us wanting to do something.
Hmm. That's really a good question. What make us motivate us to do something, to strive for something
Mm,
that, as you were talking about, Joanna, there's so much in it. When you talk about this connection from first starting point with the mother, the caregiver, from the out world, outside of the person, and then gradually when the person growing and become disconnection with ourselves, with our own feelings and the body sensations. And yet, like we were talking about so much about, stay above the head, stay above the neck, disconnect with the rest of the body, disconnect from
yeah,
our hearts, and then
yeah.
just connect intellectually, so on. So there's lots of disconnections going on inside of us, besides with outsiders, with outside the world and with other people. So here's a question I want to ask you later on, but I want to stay this a little bit longer with you. So you were talking about early disattachment and developmental trauma. Of course, we are trauma-informed therapists. We know how the trauma can, bring some detrimental impacts in a person's life, even from an early young age, right?
Mm,
But we're not going to focus on trauma today, but we're going to talk about the disconnection.
yeah.
So you were talking about from the physiological, biological,
Mm,
the perspective, talking about the, what changes, what happened in the person's um, you know, chemical and neurotransmitter and the
mm,
hormones, so on and so
mm,
forth, all those levels, and develop later on the disease,
mm,
which is disease, comes from disease, and then
yeah, yeah.
gradually develop into disease and
Mm,
chronic pain,
mm,
autoimmune system issues, so on. Um, but yeah, take us back to a little bit. You were mentioning about, from a biblical perspective, how
mm,
this connection started.
mm,
Yeah, the point on.
mm. So probably all of us at this point will think about Adam and Eve. We're probably going to think
Right,
about
back to the
how things
Genesis.
were.
Yes,
Yeah,
back to Genesis.
yeah. I want to fast forward a little bit. Maybe let's go to Abraham.
Mm.
Um, there, if we go back to think about Abraham and then his son and his grandson, just within these three generations, let's see how many disconnection we can find in their relationship, since we're
Right.
talking about relationship.
Yes.
Um, so Abraham, we'll know that he's a father of faith, and we know that God has already promised him in his early life that he will be the father of all kingdoms and then people. But then, if we're looking into his marriage,
Mhm.
what do we see? We see wives, we see betrayals, we see lies. If my husband will lie to people saying that, oh, my wife is not my wife, it's my sister, and you can take her, that the marriage will be probably will be really, really in trouble.
Yeah.
My marriage, if that happened. But then it to Abraham, it not just happened once, it happened twice.
Hmm. Yeah.
I really don't know how Sarah would want to stay in his marriage, in this marriage, but bless her heart. So in marriage, and then and then we're not talking about other marriages in his life. We're just talking about him and Sarah.
Mhm.
So that's for couples, right? The romantic relationship. And then going down to the relation between he and his sons, um, he favors he favors his child. It's not like being a good enough father, trying to parent his children, all his children in the same way. No, he chose which one he likes more. And then even before he waited until the promised child to be born, before Isaac was born, he couldn't wait for it. And so that's why we have Ishmael.
Mhm.
And to the second generation, when you think about Ishmael and Isaac, the
Mhm.
disconnection between the siblings and the fights and the distrust and the hatred, the revenge. all the hurt, they're also coming out from their previous generation, Abraham, Sarah, Hagar, all of that, distrust, disconnection, fears.
Mhm.
And then later on, after that, another generation going down. Jacob, what's going on with Jacob?
Mhm.
Again, he has a favorite child. He favored Esau. And then what happened there? He and his own wife, the marriage. Again, there's also lies between the marriage. And there's also a lot of battling between his wife and other wives, a lot of trust and mistrust, a lot of connection and disconnection. Isaac and his sons. If we're familiar with the Bible story, I will tell you a little bit background. So Isaac's son is Jacob, and Jacob has 10 sons, including Joseph. Joseph is the one who been sold to Egypt by his own brothers. So far, there's only, let me see, Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob,
Mhm.
and then Jacob's 10 sons. So there are four generations. Just within these four generations, we can see crimes, human trafficking, betrayal in marriage,
Yes.
infidelity, sibling rivalry, a lot of emotions, a lot of negative emotions, a lot of fears. And coming down just through generation to generations, we can see so many patterns. Father favors a child, generation trauma, and it's repeated by itself. Wives, the competition between wives and wives, and then also the disconnection between the husband and the first wife. It's generation through generation. But then, so there's a Bible verse in let me think. There are two. It happened two times, if I remember correctly. In Ezekiel, chapter 18, verses 2, the parents eat sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. Those are intergenerational trauma. So in the Bible, it's also said that whoever, you know, sinned, our Lord will ask for revenge for three generations and to four generations. But whoever honors the Lord, believes in the Lord, God will bless this person to 1,000 generations. So the healing, it also comes from there. When I think about relationship, like we talked about earlier, relationship, it will always exist. Even though when it ceased, it doesn't mean that it disappeared. So most of us, we are familiar with this saying, God come to seek us. Jesus come seek us. We don't know him. And then he is not stopping himself from trying to find us. He will knock on your door until you open the door and say hello to him. So the relationship between us and our Lord is quite disconnected and quite disturbed and disrupted, not just from the scene, but also from generation and generation and generational traumas that happened either with Jews or with non-Jews. It's the same. It's a whole worldwide thing. But our Lord is not stop seeking the connection with us.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, that's a summarization, where we started this disconnection. Really, you brought us back to the Genesis, really started in the garden when Adam and Eve, they
Yeah.
sinned, they fall short in their sins. So that disconnection happened between this couple and also happened between them and God. So
Mm.
that's, to me, that's the disconnection where it started because
Yeah.
our sin. So the sin in the category you explained well through Abraham, the four generations, how the passing down the sinful pattern, carry from generation to generation. And of course, disconnection happened inside the family and between the siblings, between the spouse, husband and wife, so on. So yeah, thank you for pointing this out. And tell us how this connection shapes who we are, first internally, and then how we carry that out externally.
Oh, such a good question. Yeah, so if we think about this connection, and let's go back to Abraham, since we use him as example, and not use my clan as example, it will make much more safer because everybody knows Abraham. So think about him. Think about why he lies two times to people about Sarah. There, there are a lot of fears, right? I'm afraid of something bad going to happen to me, to my family. The king like Sarah, okay, you can take Sarah in and then we'll all be saved. If we can sacrifice one person, oh, it sounds really horrible. If we sacrifice my wife and then we all get saved. But that's the fear, that's the deep drive inside of his heart. It's fear. And it comes out from the disconnection. There's no trust and there's no the like solid feeling of safety.
Mm.
And because feeling unsafe, it promotes him to do these actions. Um, Probably most of us hear about a book called Atomic Habits. He's a psychologist. Oh, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
I think he's a psychologist, right? Well,
Who?
I could. James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits.
Mm.
It's a well-known book about business and motivation and drive and how we can shape our habits. It's a good book. But he said that our behavior is based upon our perception instead of what really happened. So
Mm.
it's all about our feelings, all about our perception.
Right.
And similarly, that's the same thing with trauma. It's not about what happened to that person, it's what this person feels subjectively,
Mhm.
what the person take away from this experience. So the same thing happened to the same family. Two kids will have two different reactions.
Mhm.
Maybe one will develop into post-traumatic stress disorder or some traumatic experiences, but the other one might not. So go back to Abraham. The disconnection, the feeling of unsafe, made him prompt him to do this, lie, and separate from his wife and himself two times. And so that disconnection with himself as well. I cannot trust myself that I can be the man to protect to protect my family, to protect my wife.
Mm.
To this point, I think there are so many different layers about this connection. And
Mhm.
we use this term so many times by now. But if we go back to see the big picture, like we talked about earlier, about either with the original sin or the generational, passed down, the pain, the hurt, the untrust, distrust, or the fear or the feeling of unsafe. It's also coming from within, right? Inside of ourselves, we couldn't trust ourselves. And a lot of time, we couldn't even trust how we feel.
Mm.
Like a victim, when we feel happy,
Mhm.
or say, let's say, a sexual victim,
Mhm.
um, when I have the sense of connection, or when I have the feelings of joyfulness or pleasure, but then bad things happen. And that's why a lot of time we'll feel we're dirty, we're guilty, we're ashamed. Somebody happened to me because I did something, or that's because of me that causes things to happen.
Mhm.
And then we cannot trust our own feelings.
Mm.
But our neuroception, which is our neural circuits from the moment that we're still in mother's womb all the way until we grow up, neuroception is a way that it shaped us to, it's a survival mechanism. It actually helps us to not deal with a lot of things all the time, that we can focus on the things that's truly important. Like earlier you said, we're separated from our, bottom half, or separate from our feelings, because we have to focus on the only thing, the things that we feel that's important for now, at this moment. So the neuroception is, there are three layers, three components. One is within, how we can determine, am I feeling cold? Am I feeling hot? The physiology. Am I feeling hungry? Those are the internal cues. And also the external cues, from the external stimuli, like, oh, it's getting colder out there. I have to put on my jacket. Or this environment is really stinky. I have to get out of there. But then also there's another layers in between the human relationship, or in between the social connections. Can I trust this person? I read the social cues. I read all the non-verbals unconsciously. Like in this moment when we're talking, how you nodded or you smile, those are the social cues that unconsciously I pick up. But the neuroceptions, a lot of time, it helped us to get through some difficult moment, but in the wrong way. Meaning that if we have multiple not that good experiences with a certain type of people or person, then later on it becomes really, really hard for us to trust that kind of person, or a person with the same personality traits, or even a tone of voice, or even just a body figure, or even the perfume that the person used. So that's the power of neuroception, but also it's the not a fun thing about neuroception, because sometimes it blocks us to be able to truly connect with others.
Mhm.
For example, if, let's say, Marie, I know you're a wonderful person, but if because of my own attachment trauma, or because of my own personal journey, and there's a certain parts of you unconsciously triggered me, even though you did nothing wrong. And I know cognitively you're a wonderful person, you're a trustworthy person, full of love and really compassionate. But somehow inside of me, within myself, my neuroception is working so hard. There's something wrong with you. But if we're not building up the awareness to check in what's going on, then a lot of time we will put up our facades, we'll really turn on our defensive mechanism. I will start to do all the defensive behavior to you, push you away, or trying to shovel my feelings away
Mhm.
because I know you're a trustworthy person. Then, if that is the case, I would deny myself.
Mhm.
But if I trust myself, then I would deny you.
Mhm.
So that disconnection within myself, it play out into interpersonal relationship.
Mhm. Wow. I can see that, sometimes when in the personal relationships, that when this kind of dynamic happened, we prone to take it personal.
Yeah.
Like what you said, that either it's my fault, my problem, I'm not good enough, I cannot do anything right, self-blaming, and feel that, like you mentioned, but I want to bring it back a little bit. When we feel good, sometimes that's not good due to what happened in the history.
Mhm.
In the context that is not good. Or when we feel bad or we feel broken, then there's something wrong with me, right?
Yes.
We have
Yeah.
this idea, concept of ourselves. Or sometimes, like you said, through our perception, it's more subjective of how we experience another person in relationship. If I don't feel good in the dynamic interaction, that must be the other person's fault. So
Mhm.
we put ourselves in the victim position. If
Mhm.
I feel X, Y, Z, it must be you did, something um, wrong.
Mhm.
So that in that case, people always point a finger to others,
Yeah.
criticize, judge
This is very
others.
unfair, right?
Yes. And
Mm.
we become the standard, I cannot be wrong, but if I feel bad, must be your fault.
Mm. Mm.
So I'm just piggyback what you were saying, you know.
Yes.
I see
Yes.
that disconnection between and but how, Joanna, I wonder about this. I believe our audience out there wonder this too. So how can we bridge the gap? How can we break through the disconnection and
Mm,
actually start to build a connection, change the
mm.
dynamic? So
This is a simple question, but the answer will be really, really complicated.
maybe we can save for our next
It will
episode.
be
I
it will
know
be a
it's a new question.
lifelong experience, right? It will be a lifelong healing journey. Sometimes we don't like the term healing, feel like we are broken, so that's why we have to be healed.
Mhm,
But we're not broken. We're just human beings. We're all saint. So we are not sufficient. We're not as perfect as we were being created at first.
mhm,
Um, so technically, we're not broken.
mhm,
But let's say maybe healing journey could be saying, in a way, paraphrase to like integrating journey, like integrating our body and ourselves, integrating myself and the environment around me, and integrating what was missing and rebuild it in a way that it makes sense to me now. I would say maybe the baby step, maybe the first step will
mhm.
be the awareness.
Yeah.
The awareness start from the moment when you feel awkward, like what's going on to me? What's going on? I have a weird feeling, my heart sank, or I have a gut feeling something's going wrong, something is not right. That's awareness. Start from there and then have an internal inquiry. Just be curious instead of being really judgy or critical, but be curious about why am I feeling this way?
Mhm,
What's my thoughts? What are my feelings? How do I feel about this? Is that true? And maybe just pause right there
mhm,
and let whatever thoughts happen. And then that will be the moment that we can pause the disconnection.
mhm,
Disconnection, sometimes I tell my clients, it's just like we're like the doggy, the little puppy is chasing his tail.
mhm,
But once we pause, practice awareness, practice a mindful awareness, we pause right there, then we stop chasing our own tail.
mhm,
When we stop chasing our tail, once we restart, maybe we're going to run through the same course. However, every time when we pause, there's a possibility that we can create a new path. And if whoever you're listening to this podcast, if you believe in the Lord or in your own religion, in your own beliefs, the higher power, our Lord, our God, the higher power asks for help.
mhm. Yeah. Well, Joanna, this is such a great topic. It's a big topic. I know our time runs out, but I certainly enjoying our time together, and I wish we have more time, but we will do this again in the future. So we are going to, from disconnection, we're going to move to the connection, how to connect, you know, reconnect and
Uh,
connect in a way that is God's intended. God intended for
mhm,
us and what's the methodology behind it from,
mhm,
you know, you talk about integrate ways
mhm,
and how to regulate, how to
mhm,
integrate, how to
mhm,
rebuild and restore the
mhm,
part that has been neglected
mhm,
from a younger age. So
mhm.
fascinating topic that I want to continue on with you in the future. But today, let's just wrap it up here. Do you have last word for our audience regarding this topic today? And yeah.
No, I really enjoyed our talk today. It's a big topic. And to some of our audiences, it's really hard to chew because it will probably trigger a lot of things that happened to us in the past. Um, and I don't want to pose a false hope out there saying that, oh, you will be fine. There will be you will be fine. There will be a lot of healing. But the truth is, it takes time and energy and And
Awareness
yes,
and
yes,
intentionality. Yeah.
yes. And there will be a lot of pain and a lot of negative feeling coming out because we've been trying to avoid them or to suppress them for a long time. We create our own life that can really bypassing those fears, bypassing those unsafety feeling, those things that we don't like. But then only one thing I can tell you, whoever is listening to this podcast, is it will be worthy. It will be worthy for the hard work. And it could take a long time or it could take a really short time because
Hmm.
every one of us is different. We have different experiences. But I only thing I can promise you is it will be worthy.
Hmm.
And there will be
Yes.
a lot of support. There will be a lot of resources. Once you start this journey, you are not going to be alone.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with you totally. Yeah, just from our clinical work as a therapist and our discussion today to look into the disconnection in relationship through the lens of trauma, right? And so how the developmental trauma, in the early age, cause the disattachment and the disconnection. So there are ways, absolutely there are ways to mend, to repair and restore. But like what you said, Joanna, it takes time, takes awareness, takes
Yeah.
intentionality, it
Mm.
takes work
Yeah.
to reconnect because we have this physical body and there's something you mentioned about we have to rewire,
Mm.
reconnect inside our
Yeah.
brain, our
Mm.
body in order to adjust the whole system and to reconnect.
Yeah.
So it's a whole lot, but I think we have a good start, right?
Yes. Thank you for the wonderful summary.
So, well, thank you for tuning in and listen to today's podcast. I hope you gain some knowledge and from our today's guest speaker, Joanna. And thank you for listening. Thank you, Joanna, for your time, for your knowledge. And I'm looking forward to our more discussion in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.